don't need bruises to be wounded. You don't need chaos to feel unsafe. Sometimes the most haunting damage is done in homes that look perfectly ordinary. There's a boy named Alfred. He's sitting in the corner of a dimly lit living room. The lights aren't broken. They're just never turned on. The room is filled with people, yet it feels hollow. A television hums in the background. The ticking of a wall clock cuts through the stillness. Then, glass shatters in the kitchen. No one flinches, no one speaks. No one asks if everything is okay. The moment dissolves as if it never existed. No anger, no comfort, just a void. This isn't a horror movie. There's no monster under the bed, no screaming, no visible scars, only silence. The kind that presses against your chest like a hand you can't push off. Alfred doesn't cry. He doesn't ask questions anymore. He just knows. This is dysfunction in disguise. It doesn't always come wrapped in rage. Sometimes it tucks you in at night, smiles at your report card, asks how your day was with a voice that doesn't wait for the answer. This is the family that looks normal to outsiders because it's functional enough to hide what's broken inside. If any part of Alfred feels familiar, stay with this, because in the next few minutes, we're going to unravel something most people never dare to look at: how the dysfunction you grew up in may still be shaping your identity today. Why your anxiety, people-pleasing, perfectionism, or numbness aren't flaws, they're adaptations. We'll explore the silent rules you were taught as a child, the hidden roles you were forced to play, and the psychological blueprint that may be running your adult life without you even knowing. By the end of this video, you'll understand why you feel the way you do, why your relationships may feel like patterns on repeat, why no amount of achievement ever seems to feel like enough. And most importantly, you'll learn how to begin reclaiming the version of you that existed before you had to survive. This isn't just a story, it's a map. So don't just watch, listen closely. Your story might be hiding in between these words. Alfred learns quickly. Feelings are inconvenient, needs are dangerous, silence is rewarded. So he adapts, he performs, he disappears. Alfred is not just one boy, he's a symbol, a reflection. He's every child who had to become the parent, every teenager who felt guilty for existing, every adult who doesn't know how to rest without shame. What happens when your house teaches you that love is something you earn? When your personality is built from avoidance, obedience, or fear? This isn't about the dramatic stories that make headlines. This is about the slow, quiet suffocation of the soul, the kind of trauma that doesn't scream, it whispers. Over years, over generations. It tells you to keep smiling, to stay small, to never cause trouble, to always be good, and eventually it becomes your identity. Not because you chose it, but because it was the only version of love you were allowed to survive. Not all wounds bleed. Not all trauma leaves scars you can trace with your fingers. Sometimes it's quieter than that, more polite, more socially acceptable. Dysfunction is rarely what you think it is. It's not always slamming doors, black eyes, or angry voices echoing down a hallway. More often, it's a parent who only loves you when you perform. It's the silent treatment after you speak your truth. It's the guilt that chokes you when you dare to say no. Dysfunction is emotional neglect disguised as independence. It's the parent who says, "You've always been so mature for your age," while handing you their emotional baggage. It's the moment you start comforting the adult in the room instead of being comforted yourself. It's invisible, normalized trauma, passed off as tradition, respect, or sacrifice. There's a name for these patterns: gaslighting, enmeshment, emotional parentification. Terms that sound clinical, but in reality, they look like this. You learn not to trust your own memory because your feelings are always too much. You feel guilt for having boundaries. You become hyper-aware of everyone else's emotions while remaining a stranger to your own. It's easy to miss dysfunction when it wears the mask of good intentions. Religion might teach you to obey, no matter how it feels. Culture might tell you that speaking up is disrespectful. Family loyalty might be weaponized to silence your pain. You're told to forgive before you're even allowed to feel the hurt. In that silence, dysfunction thrives. The world says that's just how families are. As if pain passed down through generations is somehow sacred. As if survival tactics should be honored instead of healed. But the truth is, families can function while still being deeply dysfunctional. You can eat dinner together every night and never talk about what matters. You can celebrate birthdays, attend weddings, and still carry a house full of ghosts inside you. You're not just raised by people, you're shaped by emotional hierarchies, unspoken rules, and survival instincts that operate far below the surface. These rules don't scream, they whisper, they linger, they echo into adulthood. They follow you into your relationships, your self-worth, your identity. This is the illusion of normal, and breaking it is the first act of rebellion. Alfred was a quiet child, not because he was naturally shy, but because silence was safer than asking questions that made adults uncomfortable. He once cried when his drawing was torn. He was told to stop being dramatic. He once said he was scared at night. He was told to grow up. He once said he was lonely. They laughed and said, "You have everything you need." He stopped speaking after that. Children don't need to be told directly that their emotions are inconvenient. They learn it in the pauses, in the eye rolls, in the way disappointment fills a room like smoke. Alfred learned young that his feelings were threats to the emotional balance of his household. So he did what sensitive children always do. He adapted. At first, he tried to become invisible. He thought if he could disappear, he might avoid rejection. When that didn't work, he became useful, helpful, predictable. He got good grades, cleaned up messes he didn't make, always smiled in family photos. His pain, confusion, even joy, those became burdens he buried under layers of performance. What emerged was not Alfred. It was a mask. Over time, Alfred began to split. The real self, the one who was expressive, intuitive, emotionally rich, faded into the background. Too risky, too raw. Then came the false self, the curated version built for applause and acceptance. It was polished, pleasing, and utterly disconnected. Somewhere between the two, another version was born, the exiled self, the part that still remembered who he was, the part locked away behind shame and survival. As he grew older, Alfred wore different roles like costumes, the achiever who thought love came through success, the caretaker who believed worth was earned through self-sacrifice, the rebel who pushed back just to feel something, the ghost who quietly drifted through life, numb but functional. Each one born from a need, none born from freedom. He dated people who mirrored his childhood dynamics. Employers praised his perfectionism, but drained his energy. He struggled to name his own desires. Couldn't say what he really wanted, often didn't even know. That's the tragedy. Dysfunction doesn't just teach you how to behave, it teaches you who to be. Not from the inside out, but from the outside in. It replaces your instincts with expectations, your needs with roles, your identity with survival scripts. Alfred's story isn't rare, it's eerily familiar. It's the story of anyone who grew up being too responsible, too quiet, too mature for their age. Anyone who learned that love was conditional and presence was earned. Anyone who now wonders why they feel like a stranger to themselves. So ask yourself this: which version of you was born out of fear, and which one has never had a chance to be free? Attachment is the first silent language you ever learn. As an infant, you study faces, tones, rhythms, searching for safety. If comfort arrives when you cry, your nervous system whispers, "The world answers me." If comfort hesitates or punishes, the same nervous system revises the lesson. Survive alone. That revision becomes architecture. It wires your brain, it calibrates your hormones, it scripts your future relationships. Psychologists call these blueprints attachment styles. Secure if needs were met often enough. Anxious if love felt unpredictable. Avoidant if closeness hurt. Disorganized if terror and tenderness shared the same hands. None of these labels are moral verdicts. They are roadmaps of experience. When you live inside uncertainty, you develop reflexes that keep you small, pleasing, or detached. Biology offers 4 classic trauma responses. Fight grows fists of anger to push danger back. Flight outruns rejection with busyness and achievement. Freeze turns the body into stone, so pain passes overhead. Fawn trades authenticity for approval, smiling while the soul whispers no. Pause and recognize how many of your daily habits look like courage, but are really ancient strategies. Overworking, over-explaining, never resting, forever caretaking. You did not invent these patterns. They were coded into you before memory. You whispered a promise in the dark. If I do everything right, they will finally love me. The promise became your personality. Yet the story rarely starts with you. Trauma is an heirloom, handed down like an old photograph. Your grandmother survived a war, so she taught your mother hypervigilance. Your mother called it responsibility and handed it to you. Epigenetic research shows stress signatures traveling through bloodlines, switching genes on and off, preparing unborn children for battles they may never face. Survival becomes culture. Modern society capitalizes on these inherited reflexes. Corporations worship the employee who never says no, who ignores hunger and heartbeat to meet the deadline. Governments prefer citizens who freeze in learned helplessness, scrolling instead of acting. Advertisers seduce the anxious attachment, promising connection for a price. Dating apps reward fawning with endless swipes of performed perfection. The dysfunction of the household scales up, turning entire economies on the axis of unresolved fear. Read the slogans: work hard, stay hungry, be relentless. They sound motivational, yet echo childhood mantras. Be perfect, stay useful, don't rest. Rest looks like rebellion to a nervous system trained in danger. Pleasure feels suspicious. Stillness triggers alarms. Curiosity opens a door. Disciplined practice patiently guides you through. None of this makes you broken. It makes you adaptive. Every tremor in your body is evidence of intelligence. The same system that protected you can also liberate you once you offer it new data. Safety practice consistently rewrites pathways. Boundaries extinguish fawning. Gentle movement thaws freeze. Connection softens flight. Anger expressed with honesty defangs fight. Remember, you were conditioned, not cursed. What was wired through repetition can be rewired through repetition. Survival shaped your identity. Awareness can reshape it. The next chapters are not inevitable. They are plastic, waiting for choice. Alfred doesn't remember the moment he stopped feeling. There was no loud goodbye, no dramatic collapse, just a quiet, unnoticed shift, like a room slowly losing oxygen. He remembers learning how to smile at the right time, how to stay agreeable, how to nod even when everything inside him screamed no. But he doesn't remember the day he stopped crying, or the last time joy felt real. This is emotional amnesia, the slow erosion of the self, not the self you show the world, but the one buried beneath performance. It's what happens when survival becomes your full-time job. When you spend so long adapting to external needs, your internal world falls silent. You may look like you're functioning. You show up. You get things done. You laugh at parties, say thank you at the right moments, text back with the right emojis. But somewhere quietly, you've gone missing. The person you were before all the coping, all the pleasing, all the shape-shifting, forgotten like an old dream. Alfred isn't broken, he's fragmented, disconnected, a stranger to his own body. His emotions come in muted tones, gray sadness, numb joy, diluted anger. He lives in a fog where desires feel like questions he never learned how to ask. Why do I always feel tired? Why does silence feel so loud? Why do I panic when things are calm? This is what chronic adaptation looks like. It's not dramatic, it's persistent, a dull ache that sits beneath the surface of your life, a constant hum of guilt for wanting more, a reflex to shrink even when no one is asking you to. Terms like depersonalization or identity diffusion sound clinical, but in reality, they feel like this. You look in the mirror and don't recognize who's staring back. You feel like you're playing a role you never auditioned for. You keep trying to fix yourself, not realizing you were never broken, only disconnected. The tragedy is not that you forgot who you were, it's that you were never given the space to become. When your entire life is designed around avoiding conflict, staying safe and meeting invisible expectations, you lose the thread of your truth. But here's the twist. Even if you forgot, the self hasn't disappeared. It's waiting. Beneath the layers of guilt, performance, and numbness, there's a voice. Faint, but still there. It never stopped whispering. You just stopped listening. Alfred made it. On paper, he's everything the world celebrates. A stable job, a polished smile. He's the friend who remembers birthdays, the employee who never complains, the partner who always listens, dependable, calm, put together. The kind of person others look at and say, he's doing great. But Alfred is not doing great. He's exhausted. Not from doing too much, but from constantly pretending he's okay. He wakes up every morning with a quiet sense of dread and carries it into every conversation, every meeting, every text. Not loud enough to scream, just heavy enough to never leave. This is the mask of functionality, the performance of wholeness, the illusion of strength built on silent survival. No one sees the anxiety in his chest because he still shows up on time. No one notices the numbness behind his eyes because he always says the right thing. No one suspects anything because there's nothing visibly wrong. That's how dysfunction hides best. In people who look fine. Alfred learned early that emotions were dangerous. So this is the kind of hope that doesn't wear a smile. It doesn't pretend things didn't happen. It simply stops letting them define everything. Healing in its truest form isn't about forgetting the past. It's about meeting it differently, with more truth, with less shame. He understands now his sensitivity was never the problem. His ability to feel deeply, to notice nuance, to hold contradictions, these were not liabilities. They were gifts. They just didn't fit inside the narrow container of a dysfunctional home. So he makes space for them now. You don't heal by creating a perfect self. You heal by creating a safe space for your truest self to return. Not the one built to please, or to perform, or to avoid. The one that existed before you ever had to earn love. The phoenix never rises from a flawless pedestal. It rises from ash, from what was burned, from what was lost and then remembered. You are not building yourself from scratch. You are digging yourself out. Alfred sits in the same living room, the one where silence used to echo louder than sound. But now something has shifted. There's music playing, soft, human, imperfect. A coffee cup half full, a window cracked open. The room breathes. This time the silence is chosen. It's no longer the weapon of fear, but the presence of peace. Alfred isn't healed in the way movies portray. He still flinches at raised voices, still catches himself overthinking text messages, still feels waves of guilt when he says no. But something's changed. He knows why now. He understands the roots of the shame. He sees the ghosts for what they were. Echoes, not truths. He doesn't chase perfection anymore. He holds space for contradiction. And most importantly, he's no longer trying to be who they needed. He's becoming who he actually is. This story wasn't just about Alfred. It was about you. The part of you that learned to smile when it hurt. The part that thought silence was safety. The part that believed if you just worked harder, pleased better, stayed smaller, you'd finally be enough. You were never the problem. You were never too much. You were responding to a system, a structure, a silence that taught you to forget yourself. And now you remember. You are not broken. You are brave. You adapted to survive what others couldn't even name. You lived through invisible wars with no medals, no witnesses, only consequences. And still, here you are, listening, feeling, wanting something more. That desire is not a mistake. It's memory of who you were, of who you still are, of the version of you that's been waiting, not to be built, but to be welcomed back. Dysfunction may have shaped you, but it does not get to define you. If you saw yourself in Alfred, even in fragments, know this: you are not weak for what you became to survive. You are not broken for struggling to feel whole. You were shaped, but you are not stuck. The patterns can be unlearned. The mask can be dropped. The child inside you, the one still waiting to be heard, can finally come home. This story wasn't just about trauma. It was about truth. and your truth matters. If this made you pause, if it stirred something you can't quite name, let it. Comment below. What part of this hit the hardest? What role did you play in your family? Let this be a space where silence ends. If you found value here, subscribe. This isn't just content, it's connection. And if you believe someone else needs to hear this, share it with them. Because sometimes healing doesn't start in therapy. Sometimes it starts with a story that finally puts your pain into words. We're just getting started.